main reason why entrepreneurs are important to our economy relates to innovation. Existing companies can be rigid in their ways of thinking and how they operate. Entrepreneurs create new businesses which bring about innovation, which keeps our economy relevant in the global markets which we operate.
Entrepreneurs enable new markets to be developed through innovation. And with the alarming unemployment rate in South Africa, there has never been a stronger need for entrepreneurs to step up and tackle unemployment.
Entrepreneurs are the change makers, the difference makers, the job creators, the visionaries. Entrepreneurs think differently. We are willing to break things in order to build something better, faster, or cheaper. Without entrepreneurs, there are no innovations. We drive economies forward, one business at a time.
Entrepreneurs look for problems to fix. Then they go about fixing them through innovation. At their own personal risk, they make things easier, more streamlined, more productive, and more profitable. Through consistency day after day, they build and build and build. And the result is sustained innovation, progress, job creation, and wealth for all stakeholders and the economy at large.
Create not just sustainable jobs, but they create a solution where profitability, unit economics, and commercial business viability has a much larger impact than any work that a large corporation or a government can do.
Entrepreneurs are the heartbeat of every growing economy. Because of their critical mindset and problem-solving attitude, they're able to challenge the problems of today and provide solutions for tomorrow. It's because of this that entrepreneurs create a future filled with opportunity.
Hey everyone, welcome to Founders Conference 2021. We're super excited to have all of you here today. Very thankful for all the amazing speakers that we have lined up here, and great to see so many founders and investors joining us here today. We're super stoked to be a small part of Global Entrepreneurship Week this week, hosting a South African based event for all of you guys. Let me just get a screen share up here to take you guys through what we have in store. There we go. Perfect. Felix, we can hear you in the background there, lad. Great, guys. So it's my privilege to welcome all of you guys to Founders Conference this year. We are Yeah, we're ready for a really packed afternoon of super exciting talks and panels. I think today is really going to be something really special. Just before we dive into that, I just want to stand still on Global Entrepreneurship Week, which I'm not sure how much everyone knows about this, but this is actually the biggest week in the entrepreneurship calendar every year. There are events in over 200 countries this week around entrepreneurship and encouraging people to start companies, to build businesses that can change the economy of the future. So a couple of years ago, we noticed that there was almost nothing being hosted in Cape Town. I think this was about 4 years ago. And we decided, look, we have to have a big event in Cape Town every year for Global Entrepreneurship Week. And we came up with this concept of Founders Conference that I think it's now in its fourth year. We've also built founders events around this. So you guys can look out for FundraiseCon in March every year, where we bring a bunch of thought leaders around fundraising together to talk about fundraising for entrepreneurs. We have ScaleUpCon generally around mid-year, where we talk about scaling up and scale up methodology and how to really grow a company exponentially. November each year, this week, we've got Founders Conference. And then there are various webinars and events throughout the content year. That we just try to kind of like bring entrepreneurs and free thinkers and investors together to have a sit down to learn from people who've gone the way before us in terms of experience of building companies in one way or the other, starting them, growing them, selling them, and whatever have you. And with the virtual events now, we're able to reach quite an exciting audience in Cape Town and way beyond. So really excited to be here with you guys today. How the structure of our events always works, there's a couple of really strong keynotes, generally around a 10-minute or so core keynote. And then there's a couple of panel discussions where we have a few people in a panel format, and we're quite excited to see how that goes. And just generally, I think you guys have seen the speaker lineup in the event plan. You've seen it now in the introduction video. I think we've gotten a bunch of amazing people here on the call today who have incredible experience shares for us. So really excited to hear from all of them. So yeah, from my side, let's dive in. Founders Conference is open and active, and we'll jump right into the first little bit. So as a opening chat, I've just been asked to just share a little bit about the outsource CFO journey. We've never done this on any one of our event platforms, and there's been a couple of asks just around like just a bit of like learning share, like what has our journey been like, and what have we really learned? What have I learned, I guess, also in this process of building outsource CFO? Next month will be 8 years into business, so it's kind of an exciting milestone. So I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit about how it started and share a couple of lessons that I think have been instrumental for us on this journey of building outsource CFO over the years. So it all began on one startup grind night many moons ago, a little bit over 8 years ago, I guess. The very first Cape Town-based Startup Grind event was held. So if you don't know Startup Grind, about 70 or so entrepreneurs would pitch up on an average night. They would listen to a panel interview by the host with an entrepreneur who's built a successful company, and we'll have, there'll be a very interesting conversation around that. So the first night we rocked up there, we were still working in an accounting and auditing firm at the time. And we noticed that there were 70 different entrepreneurs, engineers and innovators and designers and creatives, all building companies, but there were no accountants in the room. And we said, look, someone actually has to help all of these founders with their finances, and we think we can be those guys. So we took the plunge. We had basically an idea of a concept that we think could work, that we called outsourced CFO, the idea of a part-time chartered accountant level professional who can work with an entrepreneur to help them build their company. We basically had an unproven business model, no clients, no contacts, and just about no funding. But we managed to worm ourselves into a tech incubator, which we were not a tech company, we were a services company, but we managed to get into the Bandwidth Bonds one extra incubation program. We got some free desk spaces with that for our first 6 months, as well as a stable internet connection. So we were basically off. This is a very interesting moment along that journey. Obviously, in the early days, we tried a whole bunch of different things to get traction and momentum. This is me doing my elevator pitch to a room full of primary school kids from a print-out sheet that we were trying to communicate what we're trying to do. So I'm sure everyone who's ever started a company has a story similar similar to this, where you just kind of like started, figuring out like, how do you present, how do you talk, who do you talk to, in which ways do you do it? And we'll get to the rest of this story at some later stage. But altogether, we managed to build a bit of traction, to start building a team, to start building up some clients. We started adding some credibility to the team, and the team grew. We were lucky to add some really exciting clients, guys like Microsoft and Investec and some other household name founder-led companies. We got our own office space, and the team kept expanding over the years. Today, we're sitting at about an average annual growth rate of 62%. The current growth rate means we are doubling about every 19 to 20 months from where we stand right now. So it's a nice and fast growth environment. We've got 50 professionals working for the company between full-time and part-time now. We've worked with over 600 client companies throughout the years, and they've been based in 17 different countries. Obviously, most of all South Africa, but also a lot of interesting places all around the world. We've just launched a new home for outsourcecfo.com, and we've also planted some roots across the waters with an incorporation in the United States of a new entity called Outsourced CFO Incorporated. So some interesting things on the horizon there. But yeah, so actually just want to share like a handful of lessons. These are 10 things that I think have been pivotal for me in terms of my learning journey. I think if you look at this photo on the right, you can maybe in my face see a couple of those lessons sitting in there. The first one was just the importance of co-founders. I've sat with so many entrepreneurs in early stages and much later stages who really have a tough time dealing with the co-founders. We've been super blessed in that we went to varsity together, where we did articles together, and most of us have lived together at different stages, and we started a company together. And that foundation of friendship and kind of like just alignment in terms of what we want to do has been really pivotal. So if you can find the right people and build relationships with them, like building a company alone is really tough. Great co-founders make it so much easier and so much more fun. I think my second one is that vision and values must be alive in the organization. If you're one of the core founders, I think you'll realize as the business grows that if the team isn't aligned around the vision and the values of the organization, then almost nothing can work. So your number one job throughout many of the years of building the company, early stages and later, is just making sure that you drive vision and you make sure the values are alive in the company. We've built a big purpose statement around why we want to help entrepreneurs and why we exist, that we try to communicate as often as we can. And this is really the reason why we started, to help entrepreneurs build more successful companies and make a bigger impact in society and in the world at large. The third lesson is around strategy and rhythms. They're really absolutely key. If you want some great reading, anything from Jim Collins, look at Scaling Up from Vern Harnish, look at The E-Myth Revisited, and look at Gino Wickman's Traction. These couple of kind of foundational books really form the principle of a vision traction model, where you have your long-term vision elements, like your big, hairy, audacious long-term goal and your core values, but you also have your traction elements like your quarterly planning and your weekly and daily meeting rhythms. Building all of this into your organization is a really great accelerator of growth. Just to share our big, hairy, audacious goal, this is something we came up with a couple of years ago. It's all around that, that almost like career-long journey towards a massive target that you want to achieve in 10 or 15 years if everything goes well. And your whole strategy is then built around aiming for that massive top of the mountain target. So we're accountants, and in true finance professional format, we said we want to reach 10,000 entrepreneur clients, and we want to empower 1,000 professionals on that journey as our BHAG. And we want to do that while our team is flourishing, while we build raving fan clients, and while we do sweet spot work. We feel if we can do this, we'll make a dent in our universe. And if we keep growing the way we are right now, we can do this in under 10 years. And we're quite excited about that journey. You can say what you want about Gary Vee. He has a bit of a party mouth, but he has some really great ideas on marketing and branding. He recently did a talk where he was quoted saying, just brand is everything. As one of the founders, I think, it's your job to share the story, to be the biggest fan of the organization, to be like Mike. Like, if you guys don't follow Mike Scott on LinkedIn already, please do so. He's an excellent advocate of Nona that you guys will hear about a little bit later. But really do advocate the brand of the organization. From a marketing perspective, like don't market. Like, try to find ways to add value was one of our big lessons. Kind of share ideas, share know-how, bring people together. Like, don't push product. Really, it's really kind of like putting out value, and conversations come to you. A big early lesson for us was also don't sell, listen. Like, don't try to push your product and try to say what you can do too much. Really listen to what the other person on the other side of the table is really looking for, and try to find those pain points and work through that. Structure sets you free is number 7. Create divisions, build good reporting structures, create role clarity, set KPIs, create playbooks, and empower your leaders. This is really what helps the founders not go crazy as the organization scales. Make sure that cash flow is the heartbeat of the organization. If cash flow isn't working, then nothing is working. So firstly, you must grow, but then you must figure out how to be profitable and how to turn that profit into cash. So really kind of let the numbers lead you in that. Number 9 is business is all about people. Like, never overvalue relationships. Like, every team member, invest in their growth, their journey, their connection with you. Give credit and give feedback, and really double down on your team. And then think big is number 10. South Africa is only 0.25% of the global GDP, which I found quite an interesting stat when I came across this a little while ago. So if you want to build a significant company, thinking worldwide is quite an exciting thing. I think it's more possible now than ever before in history. And then last bonus lesson, I would say, like, don't burn out. This has been one of my core lessons. Like, just keep the pace manageable. There are so many asks, but for you as a founder, not to burn out is an absolutely critical thing as you push forward through the years of building your company. So that is me. Thank you very much for that. I'll hand over to a way more capable speaker than myself. Yvonne, would you mind joining me on stage, please? Guys, we're in for a really exciting treat here. Yvonne has put together one of, I think, the best keynotes I've ever heard. And we're privileged today to have her on stage with us again to share some ideas of our founder life design with us. Yvonne, over to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Hello, lovely to see you again. I'm just imagining all the rest of your faces out there. Yeah, thanks for having me today. I've done a similar talk to this before, and each time I look at this content, I really I'm so amazed at how useful it is to me on a daily basis, but also how applicable it is, I think, to everyone. And in preparing for this talk in this context, business founders, entrepreneurs changing the rules and changing the world, I'm struck by how difficult it is to be in this role. Of course, it's fun too, almost all of the time. But if you think about it, it's also wildly difficult to think of something novel, build it, manage it, and scale it, and then keep your life together and yourself sane at the same time. Have you ever wondered how entrepreneurs of yesteryear, the ones that did what they did when message traveled by post and fax, could possibly have thought of themselves as busy? They lived lives at a much slower pace, assimilating a fraction of the input that we work through each day. Have you ever wondered how on earth we as entrepreneurs will be able to survive with the exponential increase in information, responsibility, and expected output at an exponentially faster pace in future? And in this day and age, what each of us are expected to carry, I think, is pretty much impossible. And it's only going to increase. And this used to keep me up at night, but thankfully not anymore. Through trial and error, I've worked out 3 principles that for me, and with ruthless application, have left me with extra time and space to play with, a level of freedom, success, and contentment that I had not imagined possible. What I've learned is from my own journey. It's not specific to being a female entrepreneur or a legal entrepreneur, but I'd like to share it because it's been so profound that it's the thing that's most commented on by the people that I meet. My business, Caveat Legal, is a virtual law firm, an Airbnb for lawyers, if you will, with around 50 top-tier legal specialists who we make available to businesses through an online platform that removes most of the bulk and cost usually associated with lawyers. Our business model was so robust that we didn't need to make a single change when COVID hit, and we posted revenue growth of 65% that year, just in time to celebrate our 10th birthday this year. I'm also a single mom with 3 kids, a dog, a kind of functioning household, and I'm also the founder of an NGO tackling gender-based violence. So what are these 3 principles that make surviving and thriving in the entrepreneurial overload possible? For me, they are the following. 1, simplicity.
Let's just give everyone a second. I think we've got a bit of an internet issue on that side. Question has to be asked whether it's load shedding. It's awkward timing, but it's possible. Okay, guys, maybe while we try to get Yvonne back, maybe she'll just do a power switch and we can still hear those principles. Gabor, I see you're online already. I know we're a few minutes early for your session. Would you mind jumping in a tiny bit earlier so we can give everyone some space to get her internet sorted out?
Sure, I can do that. I'm more than happy to do that. Hi, Lou.
Okay, hey Gabor, how are you?
Pretty darn good. Can you hear me?
Right.
Yeah, good. So, you know, I took your words to heart to balance the work. So I decided to put an empty piece of, you know, there's no work in there.
Nice.
Unfortunately, that is not the case. So once again, thank you very much for having me here. I was asked by you, Lou, to tell the story of startup to exit. And so I will first do a little timeline and also give you content on that. And then, of course, dive into the main learnings and what I think is important. And maybe if, you know, a question would arise in the course of my 10 minutes, and I'm more than happy to answer. So the first thing, to my background, we started a management consulting company, which is very interesting and very good to have because we are focused on the energy sector and infrastructure, and so we always get good ideas of what could be and should be done. However, there's a big difference between consulting and actually doing it as an entrepreneur. You know, as a consulting, you are kind of like a perpetual smart ass, like always knowing everything better, but not having to do it. And then once you start your own company and actually getting involved and putting your finances and your money where your mouth is, it all changes quite a bit. As we all know. And so our coming from was to look at emission targets. And as we all know, CO2 emissions have to be lowered, general emissions have to be lowered. And we have made quite a bit of headways here in Germany with renewable energies and for the energy sector. But the transport sector didn't really got any emission reduction for the most time. And that is quite a pity because it cannot be just one sector. Like, you know, it's all nice and well to have renewable energy being good, but the transport also needs to lower emissions because it has about 20% of CO2 emissions. And also the transport sector, 5% of the vehicles are heavy-duty trucks and ships on river ships, but they account for about 30% of emissions. So in 2015, we decided to have a look at that and what technology is available and which way we could do. And so, you know, we were looking at different technologies and did a roadmap on what could happen until 2030 in terms of emission reduction in the transport sector. And so we founded a company which would replace diesel. So us being infrastructure guys, we decided to actually build stations. Stations of all alternative fuel to any oil-based product. So we will not sell diesel of any type, but we will do, you know, whatever is technologically available and economically feasible. And so at the time being, that is LNG, liquefied natural gas. So we actually started to build LNG stations. So we did a concept and did the seed investments ourselves and got an A round in 2016. We raised about, I believe, 3 million euros in 2016, and then started permitting and procurement. And I may say that if I look back at what we did back then, well, we are always getting a big smile in our face. So we didn't really know what we were doing. We thought we are very smart, but we didn't really, of course, until 2019 when we started our operation. And so in 2020, after 4 full years of operation, we had a full profit, for the full year profit, and had 8 stations up and running. At the end of this year, it will be 21. Next year, 40, and by 2025, it will be 100 stations. We are market leader in Germany, actually being bigger than Shell, which is number 2 being Shell. So that's quite nice. A bunch of guys out of the little office deciding to become market leader in alternative fuel and transport. In addition to building our stations, we also decided to go ahead according to our strategy and turn from available, what we call gray LNG of today, into bio LNG. So with a CO2 intensity of 0. So it will basically be mostly waste and manure-based gas being used in the transport sector. So there will be no emissions whatsoever. And we also decided to go in the marine business. So we are chartering a seagoing ship and start bunkering cruise ships, ferries, and so on and so forth. So the business is really accelerating quite a bit from year to year. Looking at our shareholderships from the A round in 2016, we also decided that in order to keep up our accelerated growth, we should maybe get one but big shareholder into our company. And so this year we are quite happy. We sold 90% to a huge international resource trader called Vitol. And so we now have all the financing, all resources available. They especially also brought a lot of know-how to the table in terms of trading, swapping. I mean, if you are looking at hydrogen, at bio-LNG, at EV, like electric vehicles, there's so much to play. Our offering now starts to include also equipment, let's say, to the city of Berlin. We would give them electric buses and the charging points and the renewable electricity all in one hand starting next year or in 2 years. So we really are out there to reduce the emissions and the transport sector. And our goal is to help to reduce that by 2030 here in Germany by 50%. So that's our main goal. That's how we got started. I have to say our exit was okay. We were quite happy with that. For how do we got there? Every 6 months or so, I thought we won't make it. I mean, building infrastructure means you have to buy equipment. It's like 1.5–2 million. And every time we thought that we just secured financing, 2 months later, again, we knew we need more. So it was a constant rush for funding. So the challenges change from knowing how to do permitting, knowing how to procure proper equipment, getting the financing in place, finding customers. All of us know those challenges. There's a constant change of challenges. All I can say is just stay committed and dedicated. Have your goal, go after them, and just work hard enough. That, of course, needs to be done by a team. Lou, you pointed it out. Team is, I think, the most important to get where you want to get to, and be prepared to fight. Like I would say, every 6 months, once a year, you think it won't be possible to continue. You will always find a solution. Like it's good to get scared. It keeps you on your toes, but there's always a solution to every problem. So that is basically, in short, our story here of decarbonizing transport sector in Europe. The outlook, we go European. We now start to do M&A activities ourselves by trying to to partner with other companies buying, majorities and other European providers of alternative fuels, tackling different parts of the world in terms of the marine business. So growth. By 2025, we hope to have 500 million revenue as a company and be one of the largest players, at least in Europe. So much my story from startup to exit.
Sure, that's quite a story for just a few minutes, Gabor. Thank you very much for giving us some insights into all of that. I had a good smile on my face a couple of times, and as I'm sure many of the audience also did. Thank you very much for taking time out of your, what I can imagine, crazy schedule out in Berlin to spend some time with us. Gabor, I see Yvonne is back online. So Yvonne, maybe we can get you up to do the last 5 minutes of your talk. I know those points are golden. Gabor, then if at the end we have some space for some questions, then we'll open it up. If anyone has a question for Gabor as well, pop it into the chat and we'll catch it for the end, okay? Yvonne, over to you.
Hello. I had a rerun of my first swimming gala ever, where I didn't realize it was a full start, and I swam Stok Alien to the end of the pool whilst everybody else turned around. So I've just actually told you guys my whole speech, but I'm going to go back and I think I know where we were cut off. So let me go back there. So today I'm going to talk about life design. Through trial and error, I've worked out 3 principles that for me, with ruthless application, have left me with extra time and space to play with, and a level of success and commitment I had not imagined, I had not imagined possible. What I've learned is from my own journey, not specific to being a female entrepreneur or a legal entrepreneur, but I'd like to share it because it's been so profound that it's the thing most commented on by the people that I meet. My business, Caveat Legal, is a virtual law firm, an Airbnb for lawyers, if you will. We have about 50 top-tier legal specialists who we make available to businesses through an online platform that removes most of the bulk and cost usually associated with lawyers. Our business model was so robust that we didn't need to make a single change when COVID hit, and posted revenue growth of 65% in that year, just in time to celebrate our 10th birthday this year. I'm also a single mom with 3 kids, a dog, a kind of functional household, and I'm also the founder of an NGO tackling gender-based violence. So what are these 3 principles that make surviving and thriving in the entrepreneurial overload possible? For me, they are the following. 1, simplicity. In this life, it's survival of the simplest. Simplicity means to strip out the non-essential, slim things down and keep them basic. 2, design. Design every aspect of life for efficiency and freedom. This means being deliberate in building systems that work, moving things around and making iterative adjustments to remove friction and achieve efficiency. And number 3, consistency. Positive change, I've noticed, comes only from repeated and ongoing application of the same principles: simplicity, design, consistency. So for each area of overwhelm in my own life, the process I have followed has looked something like this. I've stripped it down of everything that is not the thing that I want, or in service of the thing I want. I've designed and built exactly what I want with what's left, and I've followed this up by consistently re-implementing and reinforcing every day. Now, the idea of design may be sexy, but simplicity and consistency are definitely not sexy. Keeping things basic and repeating things daily is definitely not exciting. In fact, it can be downright boring, not the optimal state of mind for an entrepreneur. But over time, these actions compound, and the result is more and more value, like compound interest. Simplicity, design, consistency. I believe that in future, our success and possibly even our ultimate survival will depend on our focus on these 3 principles. Let's have a look at this in more depth. I'll use 2 aspects of my life to illustrate. First, in business, key to the Caveat business model is absolute simplicity. Simplicity for clients, simplicity for lawyers, simplicity for me and the management team. Every decision is made with a view to reducing complexity. For example, we work to remove complexity and friction points for clients and lawyers every day. Personally, I have removed or outsourced all tasks that make my work complex or take me out of flow. The result is that Caveat is now a huge machine with no offices and only one official employee on the payroll. Then, in my personal life, key to my happiness is absolute simplicity. I have removed all things that unnecessarily take time, like driving, or energy, like draining friendships or tasks that create power struggles with my kids, and focus only on the things that feed me and us. The result in my life looks something like this on any given day. I wake up every morning to the tinkling sound of my sons unpacking the dishwasher after they've woken up and dressed themselves and before they've made their school lunch. I take the dog for a quick walk, make breakfast for us, and do a craft activity for my daughter. The boys walk or skate to school. I walk Anna to school. I then work, but only on the things I like. The rest is done by more capable and inspired people. I meditate. I exercise, often with one or other dear friend. I do most extramural runs on foot. I work. The kids do their homework in their own time. And when they're done, they sign my name in their homework diaries, which I taught them to do on the first day they got homework. We cook, we have dinner together, we walk, skate, or hang out in the evenings, and then we go to bed. Now, this didn't happen by accident. I stripped out all the unnecessary and designed our life for efficiency and freedom. And we live these principles every day. Simplicity, design, consistency. If this resonates with you, give it a try. Like most things in life, you'll find that by living these principles, you'll attract others with similar values in work and in life. It's been amazing to see how those who align with our values seek Caveat out for their legal work time and again, and refer us to like-minded people. The whole process has been very natural, and it takes absolutely no force. With this level of careful thought and deliberate action, vital change takes shape, and importantly, vital space opens up for life. It really is that simple.
Sure. Yvonne, if we were in an auditorium, there would be a loud applause, as I'm pretty sure you do. Thank you so much for sharing these principles with us again on this platform. It's always amazing to hear, and yeah, absolute big fan of what you're doing with Caveat and with your life.
Great pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Okay, guys, we're moving on to our first panel discussion. Can I please ask everyone who's in Damien's panel to join us on stage? Damien and Tim Mortino and Aidan Casserly and Christy Fourie will all be on stage here with us now. We're going to be talking about something that's quite critical to building a scalable company, and that is creating scalable infrastructure for that company. So specifically looking at how the cloud is changing the way business is done. Damien's going to lead us in a conversation with some entrepreneurs and professionals who are using cloud infrastructure to grow their businesses. Damien, over to you.
All right, thank you, Lo. And I'm so excited to be here tonight. And I've got some very passionate speakers here today. Just a quick introduction. So I'm Damien Baker, the head of cloud accounting at Outsource CFO, and I've got some fantastic speakers here tonight. So I've got Tim, Aidan, and Christy. So I just want to ask each one just to quickly introduce yourself and just explain who you are, what your company does, and let's take it from there. So Tim, I'll ask you to start.
Cool. Thanks, Damien. Hope everybody can hear me. First of all, I'm feeling super inspired, right? Because those stories from Yvonne and Kabur were unbelievable, right? At the same time, I'm feeling suitably guilty because I feel like I gained a lot. I'm not sure that anybody's going to gain nearly as much from me after those two speaking.
Not true.
So I'm Tim. I'm MD of a business called Intembeco Investment Administrators. The one thing that did make me feel good was Yvonne said unsexy is cool. And effectively, we do the completely unsexy side of investment administration. We do the stuff that nobody wants to do, which might be unsexy, but at least it makes for a good business model because nobody else wants to compete with you.
All right, thank you, Tim. Short and sweet, I like it. Aidan, yourself?
Hi, Damien, and hi, everybody. Thanks very much for inviting me this afternoon. It's a huge pleasure to be here. Tim, whenever I've been on a talk with you, it's been hugely of value. So please don't talk yourself down. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I'm the CEO and founder of Castle Rock. We're a managed IT services company. We focus on supporting business ICT infrastructure in Cape Town and Johannesburg. I'm not being paid to say this, but we have doubled in size since partnering with OCFO. So I will add that there. Lo, you can put a big smile on your face.
All right, Aidan, thanks for that little sell there. And Christy, my fellow colleague, just a quick intro as to who you are and what you do in the Integrate division.
Thanks so much. Yeah, such a privilege to be on this panel for sure. So I'm Christy Fourie, and I'm part of the Integrate team at OCFO. And we are cloud app integration specialist, and we create automated financial and operational environments for our clients to drive their efficiency within their organization.
Fantastic, Christy. So guys, we want to chat a little bit about infrastructure and how it affects the companies and how it is critically important to have a proper setup in your organization to scale it and grow it and have efficiencies. So Tim, from the financial institution, your initial startup when you started your operations, was it conducive to an effective work environment on your operations?
So I suppose the important thing to understand about our business is, one, we're quite young, and so we haven't been around for a long time. We've been operational for 3 years, right? When we started out, there was a period of time when basically our accounts were dormant. We had lots of expenses, but no revenue coming in, and so we didn't put proper structures in place. Things were manual. We didn't have a proper finance function. We didn't have great control. So I suppose I'm explaining a little bit of a horror story and making it dramatic, and I promise you it's far more dramatic than I'm even making it sound. But ultimately the answer is no. It wasn't conducive for us having a great control environment, and it certainly wasn't conducive to be able to scale out.
Tim, I understand that. So that is where most small businesses find themselves initially, that they just run in, they start their business operations, and then that bit of that administration, that internal operations do fall back a little bit, and it causes these internal struggles, and then here's the business owner so focused on getting your internal structures working that you actually lose sight of the main core of your business, and that's to grow it and expand it and get more customers. And Aidan, this is where I want to jump into you. So I know that we've gone through a very tough few months due to COVID and the lockdowns, and I know that you live and breathe cloud infrastructure. So if you can just maybe tell us how in this whole COVID pandemic period, how you as Castle Rock has actually helped clients enable their cloud infrastructure and develop it further for them and help their businesses grow.
Thanks very much, Damien. Yeah, so let's kick off March 2020. We're all sitting in the lounge.
The start.
Yeah, the start of the story. Introduction. Our beloved president gets up on the TV, and it's especially for us here in South Africa, you know, our relationship with the state is very different to our European counterparts. It's typically always been at arm's length, and now all of a sudden we've got somebody up on TV addressing the nation, you know, and that's, I think it hadn't really happened since 1994 or something like that. It was, I mean, I recount what had happened, at least from my perspective, is that we were quite fortunate in Castle Rock insofar as the majority of our clients we had already worked on a best practice and moved them. You know, we see ourselves at the edge or quite close to the edge. So the majority of our client base was already making use of public cloud infrastructure. You know, when Google came to be very prevalent in 2010, you know, we started with that, and then Microsoft, you know, launched 365 in 2014, and we got on the bandwagon. They had managed to work out some of the kinks, and it became more prevalent. So the majority of our clients that were making use of public infrastructures, and they had a lot of redundancy, and they were actually able to switch to remote working setup with relative ease. The problem came in where there was the exception. There's always the exception. Pareto's 80-20. You had a group of clients that were not ready to move to the cloud. They had on-premise servers. They for whatever reason, budgetary constraints or latency limitations or whatever the case might be, they weren't ready to make the jump. So, you know, myself, my colleagues were sitting in our lounges. Ramaphosa's up on the TV. All of a sudden, WhatsApp is lighting up a Christmas tree. How soon can you move us to the cloud? How soon can you complete complete the migration. And so we had to quickly scurry and pull a rabbit out of a hat and make things happen and basically move that 20% of the client base to the cloud in 2 days. And that was good fun. But just to quote Satya Nadella from Microsoft, he actually said during the earnings report last year in April, in parentheses there, we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. So that speaks to the speed at which everything was occurring last year. I'm quite comfortable and quite happy now that things have sort of tapered out somewhat.
Aidan, I can agree fully, and it has caused massive change in the market, and people's minds have shifted towards this whole thing about remote working and let's digitize our information. Let's work in the cloud for protecting our data and our own operations. So, Christy, I know that you also faced a lot of these challenges as well during COVID. And from your experience, how has this cloud infrastructure changed your approach to our clients, and how have you helped our clients in the last few months now during COVID as well to upscale the infrastructure?
Well, I think it's very important to touch on the process that we take at Integrate, because I think it's critical in really assuring that success. Because I think people have this idea like, okay, we're going to the cloud, it'll be our one size fits all solution. It's going to solve all of our big problems. But the reality is that a poorly designed system, whether it's in the cloud or not, is going to fail you as a business owner. So the way that Integrate really works is we spend quite a bit of time in assessing the client's needs. So we perform a gap analysis, and then we work very closely in implementation to refine those key success factors for our clients. And then important is whatever we recommend, we are always looking at integrating. So we're not recommending systems that sit in silos from one another. We really feel that if you are going to be going to cloud, you need to benefit one of the main key factors, which is that beautiful flow of data between all of your different systems that you've implemented. And because of that, we really try to create a robust solution to whatever the client's needs are at that point, but also to looking towards the future. So that's a quick summary. I have some case studies, but I'm very aware of time.
Christy, I think that is perfect. Tim, I just want to check in with you now regarding the whole adoption to the cloud infrastructure. How has your internal operations changed and your processes changed since you adopted cloud technology through the assistance of Outsource CFO?
So I think it's important to take the backdrop of that really dire situation, very manual, not particularly scalable, and maybe to give our finance person credit, it's important to ensure that when you don't know, that you go to the people who do know. Right. And so what we do in partnering with Outsource CFO was we got really great guidance of what the appropriate architecture could be for us. Right. And that wasn't sort of a hard sell. I was just saying, well, this is what we think is appropriate, just like what Christy's mentioning there. And it made complete sense to us, because first of all, from a cost perspective, and then also from a scalability perspective, because of the work that was then done in the infrastructure that we now have, that finance team, although similar to Aidan, we've basically doubled in revenue, our finance team has stayed exactly at the same, right? All of
incredible.
One person, which is phenomenal. And I think there are a few things in that enabled it. One, going to the right people, two, making the right decisions, so having the right guidance, right? Then all of those months of chaos or manual work, I suppose, Outsource CFO then had the skill to help us catch up with that and get the record keeping done. And maybe so our head of finance wants me to always share the story, and she goes, in November 2018. Right, the Outsource CFO team processed and reconciled 10 months of transactions, right, over a period of 1 to 2 months, and then we were audit ready by Jan, right, which is a phenomenal feat, right, and something that we'll always be grateful of. And I suppose that describes the journey, just in terms of being helped, in terms of guidance, the journey in terms of being able to get it done and to execute on it, right? And then because of the help that was supplemented alongside, we've been able to be incredibly scalable. And again, that double revenue growth, we're a business for 80 people. So we're not tiny, we're not huge, but we're not tiny. And to be able to run that with one finance person is sensational, and really a testament to the architecture and the software that we're using.
Thank you so much, Tim. Yeah, we're running out of time here a little bit. So just the last thoughts from Aidan, Tim, and Christy. Cloud adoption, a yay or nay? So Aidan.
Well, I have to be a proponent of cloud adoption. It's a big
It's your business.
Yeah, exactly. It's a cornerstone of our business. I would expand on sort of which cloud. You know, if you were looking at running an enterprise proprietary application, then you could look at or if you had privacy concerns, you could look at a bespoke private cloud, and we offer that as Castle Rock. If you're running a business 20, 30, 40, 50, up to 100 plus users, and you're looking to consume sort of your typical productivity software, enterprise email, and move your data stores to an accessible, reliable cloud, then something like Microsoft 365, which essentially is public cloud, could serve you quite well. I think the cons around on-premise should be quite clear. Requires maintenance, becomes deprecated quite quickly. The speed at which tech moves, downtime is expensive. Especially now we're essentially in the fourth industrial revolution, and the majority of our economy and the global economy is service-based. So downtime is very, very expensive. You can't afford for your people not to be connected, for them to have access to your business applications and key platforms.
But Aidan, thank you so much. Guys, our time has come to an end. I want to say thank you so much for your insightful discussions that we've had. And Lo, I'll hand over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Damien. Thanks to everyone on the panel. Really appreciate the insights. Thank you for all of those shares, and congratulations on the companies all of you guys are building. It's so amazing to see. Right, do we have Dustin Graham with us on the line? Dustin, would you mind joining me on stage here, please?
Hello.
Dustin, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks. I just spilled my water all over my desk.
Okay.
It's one of these cool things. Like, I've been sitting here for 20 minutes listening so patiently, and then I knocked my water over. So nice way to start.
The good news is we can see you. We can't see the water, and your computer is still functional, so we should be all good.
Yeah, no, it's chaos. It's all over my pants as well. So it's a good thing this is not in person.
I was about to say, luckily it's a virtual event. We wouldn't have known any better. Guys, Dustin Graham is with us today. He's one of the gurus of packaging and selling your company in South Africa. Their company, Benchmark International, is an absolute thought leader on the topic. So we've just asked Dustin to talk to us about the exit trends that they're seeing in the market at the moment. Is this a good environment to build for sale? Is this a good environment to sell your company in? Like what kind of acquisition appetites are we seeing? We're very keen to just hear what your market insights are, and we'd really appreciate some of those shares. Thank you.
Cool. I wasn't sure if you were going to ask me questions along the way, Lo, if I'm just talking. So it looks like I'm just going to be talking. So this is in no real order, and I'll just blabber on and see if some of it lands. But I think I've only got 10 minutes, but if I were to try and distill it down, let's go to the state of the world over the last 18 months or so. I think M&A loves volatility. So, the whole sector, it just enjoys it when things are a little bit turbulent. In the beginning, though, in the beginning of COVID, which was this global pandemic story, that it wasn't just a South African thing. We've had South African issues before. I think maybe even the previous Founders Conference, I spoke about, the 2019 issues when we had, the elections, and Eskom were doing sort of enthusiastic load shedding, and we had a whole lot of problems going on there. That was a South African story. This global one is a little different, right? But certainly in the last 6 months, we have just seen a spate of deals come through. It's as though the bubble couldn't hold on any longer, and it just burst. Cash had been accumulating globally for the pandemic, or over the pandemic, and it's just exploded. And certainly, look, I can only talk from our experience, but we've done more deals in the last 6 months than we did in the 18 months before that. So it's really quite exciting to see. I want to tell you that that's across sectors. It's not necessarily across sectors. There have been ones that you would expect that have performed slightly better than others. I don't want to go into that. That's the tech and education, healthcare, SaaS businesses, the ones that you would expect, e-commerce, logistics, particularly last mile logistics. So those have been really prevalent. But but we've seen activity across all the sectors, and particularly of late. So I don't want anyone listening to this to be disheartened by that. One of our process that we follow at Benchmark anyway is that we traditionally target the more strategic acquirer rather than just the financial acquirers. I think if we're looking at pure financial buyers or financial acquirers, yeah, they're looking at these super sexy sectors that, and they're looking ultimately for their exit. But the strategic acquirers are, they're there and they've built up these cash reserves and they're starting to transact. I think what's one big trend that I'm seeing is that South African corporates or large strategic buyers have caught up with their international counterparts like overnight. In other words, what I mean by that is the pricing methodologies and the M&A methodologies that have followed. We've always been a little behind, I felt. I've always felt that in comparing our deals to our US or UK office deals, it just seems that our multiples, as an example, were a little lower than those jurisdictions. But what I'm seeing anyway is that we're catching up, and we're catching up pretty quickly. My feeling around that is that I think strategic buyers now are kind of pricing these opportunities or these acquisitions through opportunity cost and rather through traditional metrics. Now that's really exciting. What I mean by that is it's a land grab at the moment. It's a rush to get hold of the new technology to grab market share. And we're seeing these large buyers, large corporates kind of just going, well, what is it going to cost us both in time and money to replicate what this new technology or whatever it is, what that's going to cost to replicate that versus what we can buy it for. Not necessarily what is that entity earning, and let's apply a multiple to it. So that's quite encouraging. And I think it sort of segues nicely into another trend I'm seeing, which is in South Africa in particular, I just want to talk around talent. And I think, look, that's a bit of a buzzword at the moment. Everyone's talking about it. Even there's a new M&A term, acqui-hire, that's been thrown around. Old guys like me have only just recently heard that, so I'm having to Google what it means. But I'm being facetious. But really what I'm trying to impart there is that everyone is looking for good people. I think if there's one limiting constraint that deals in South Africa have, it's retaining talent, and it's retaining leaders for these businesses as they are acquired and as they're integrated into the larger machines. So if I were to look at a trend or suggest a trend, then a lot of deal structures are now having to incorporate that. In the past, we always had to address a concern with our clients who were saying, but I've had my financial manager with me for 25 years, and I hope she will survive the transaction. I don't really want to do a deal if she's going to get kicked out because whoever's buying us has this big, accounting engine behind them or accounting department behind them. Honestly, we're just not seeing that anymore. We're seeing that acquirers are looking at management teams or all teams, the entire staff and complement of target companies, and they are desperately trying to create deal structures to hold on to that talent, okay, and to that employee complement. So that's really encouraging, I think, for our businesses across the portfolio. In terms of other trends, I can't think of too many without too much time, but I think you asked me the question around value as well. And I want to say that value is not really impacted, but that would just be a lie. It is certainly the businesses that have are more, I want to say relevant, but that's the wrong word. I think businesses that are more sexy at the moment or are perceived to be more relevant are in short supply, and as a result, supply demand, they're just attracting higher multiples. But across the board, we haven't really seen a reduction in deal values. If anything, they've been uplifted. And I think that's basically because, overnight when COVID came upon us, and COVID is kind of old news now, we've caught up a little bit, but overnight the territories got taken away, and we could do a deal with an American buyer as easily as we could a local South African buyer on a South African target company. Oh. And because of that, it just kind of uplifted values across the board, as well as the cash reserves that acquirers are generally sitting on. So no real impact on value. A couple of changes to deal structure, but it's all good news.
Great, sure, doesn't that? I mean, that's super interesting. I mean, if we have half a minute left, I'd love to hear kind of like exit value compared to revenue and exit value compared to EBIT. Like, what kind of numbers are you guys generally seeing in the market right now, or is it too kind of sector agnostic and too company specific?
No, if it's okay, it's actually. I'm smiling, but it's actually irresponsible of me to say that. Genuinely, it's irresponsible because it is so specific to the transaction itself that I would just be doing everyone an injustice to say that. If I do have 30 seconds left, I want to stress a single point though that I'm seeing in the markets, and hopefully this is helpful to the listeners or the viewers. Focus on being deal ready at all times. There's certainly another trend that's just come to mind now is we're seeing a lot of unplanned deals, a lot of sporadic or spontaneous deals. So all I can encourage to the viewers is just be deal ready. And that's the stuff that OCFO do, right? You know, that's keeping everything nice and systematic in order, financials in all the rooms and all that. It's also being psychologically ready, okay? So it's about knowing what your business is worth, having that conversation with yourself and being ready for when someone's knocking on that door, because it's coming. That you can quickly have that conversation and you're quite well versed in what to say and what to do.
Amazing. Great golden nugget to leave everyone with. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Good luck with all your great big deals. We'll keep our eye on the headlines, and good luck with all the good work.
Sure. Thanks, Lo.
Thanks, man. See you soon.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Mr. Van Eden, can I ask Martin to join me on the stage, please? Martin, do we have you with us here? There's the man.
Hi, Lo.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great, thanks.
Good, guys. So Martin is a performance and leadership coach that's worked with lots of different founders and executives and professionals over the years. We've asked him to share a couple of ideas around kind of leading yourself first. And I'll hand over to you for that, Martin.
Thank you very much, Lo. It's great to be here with you all. And I'm gonna, I think, carry on where Yvonne left off. And I'm so inspired by the three things that she said. And I think if there's one thing that the last 20 months have taught us is that all of us need to deal better with change. For me and my family, it was a journey of self-reflection, reinvention, and starting over. Listen, we can complain as much as we want and blame everything and everyone for the turmoil, changes, and often real hardships we had to go through. But the main lesson for me and inspiration for this 10 minutes is that we must shift our focus from things happening to us to things happening for us. How do I take control of my own life and responsibility for my future? And that's a question that I've been asking myself and a lot of people in my coaching practice during this last 20 months. Because we all want to create a better future for ourselves and for the people close to us, and especially for the people that's in our organizations. So in the 10 minutes, or rather 8 minutes that's left, I'm going to share 3 concepts that will serve as a guide to get you where you want to be. So if we talk about self-development, you can't not quote Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl, the famous Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, philosopher, author, and Holocaust survivor, once said, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." We don't have a lot of control over situations in everyday life, but we do have a choice on how we think, feel, and act on what life throws at us. For example, like ignoring the dogs that's barking behind me. So that just proves the point. That brings us to number 1 on leading yourself. We have a choice, and our choices matter. What we choose matter. In the book 3 Laws of Performance by Steve Zaffron and Dave Logan, the first law states that your performance, or let's call it action, are directly correlated to how a situation occurs to you. How you interpret, think, and experience a situation will determine how you act. You can either choose to let life happen to you or set your intent of how you want to experience life and the life you want. Just as Yvonne said, you have to have that intent to design your life. It reminds me of the story of Alice in Wonderland, where she asked the Cheshire Cat, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" "That depends a good deal on where you want to go," said the cat. "I don't much care where," said Alice. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. "So long as I get somewhere," Alice added as an explanation. "Oh, you're sure to do that," said the cat, "if you only walk long enough." And that brings us to number 2. The second principle is change your story. What's the story I tell myself? How situations occur to us arises in the language we use, or basically the story we tell ourselves. If you think about it, life is full of conversations. Deals are made in conversation, people are hired in conversation, conflict is saved in conversation, and your life is permeated with conversation. James Clear said the most important conversation is the conversation you have with yourself. So I want you to think about it for a little bit. What's that constant conversation? What's that constant sentence? What's that constant story you tell yourselves? Because what we say to ourselves matter. How we speak to ourselves matter. The story that we tell ourselves matter. And in order to change our story and in order to change our life, we have to change our story. We have heard stories or experienced it maybe ourselves where someone like a teacher or a parent said something to us, and that sentence set us up for not living into our potential or explore our talents. We all have the sentences that determine how we see ourselves. Maybe it's someone that said that you're not really good at drawing and you stopped pursuing your creative side. And when we do that, we create a premature cognitive commitment to that sentence. We decide that's how we're going to live our life. But luckily, we have a choice. We can either tell stories of contamination, of stories I can't do it, or of redemption, that anything is possible. So the third principle is that we have to write our story. And writing your new story asks of us to leave our old selves behind and living into a new reality. And we do that by using future-based language. If we think about the most successful people in the world, their identity and internal narrative is focused on their future and not their past. We can think of creating our story like writing a script for a blockbuster movie. The basic premise of any good movie is a character who wants something and overcomes conflict to get it. Think about it, Braveheart, Fight for Freedom, or insert your favorite movie and you will get to the same conclusion. It's a character who wants something and overcomes conflict to get it. And that's what we need if we want to write our own stories, create a new narrative for ourselves. You will need to think about having a clear and compelling goal or outcome. I once heard it said that clarity, to be clear is to be kind. So think of a clear and compelling goal or outcome, a path or process you believe will lead to attainment of that goal. And thirdly, a belief that you take action, execute, and succeed with determination, resilience, and grit. You will have to decide what types of freedoms, choices, circumstances, experiences, and daily behaviors does your future self engage in? And then you have to get some power moves. And the power moves are the aggressive actions you are going to take to create the future you want. And with that, you need a sense of tough-minded optimism with a clear sense of reality and clarity of who you want to be and where you want to go. I am fascinated by this quote by Richard Rohr, and he said, "We don't think ourselves into new ways of living, we live ourselves into new ways of thinking." And that's what we have to do when we want to create a future for ourselves or want to lead ourselves into the future that we want. We can't just write and think about our story. We have to take action. We have to live into our story. I came across this piece from Mark Manson in the biography that he wrote for Will Smith. He said, "Life is learning." This is what Will Smith said. He said, "Life is learning, period. Overcoming ignorance is the whole point of the journey. You're not supposed to know at the beginning. The whole point of venturing into uncertainty is to bring light to the darkness of our ignorance. I heard a great saying once, life is like school, with one key difference. In school, you get the lesson and then you take the test. But in life, you get the test and it's your job to take the lesson. We're all waiting until we have a deep knowledge, wisdom, and a sense of certainty before we venture forth. But we've got it backwards. Venturing forth is how we gain the knowledge. And that for me is, we don't know what the future is going to hold for us, but we have to take the courage to write that story and to live into it. And my wish for you is that you realize that there is a great story within you, within your company, for every person that you lead, but you have a choice. You can write the narrative and you can become more than you ever could imagine. And I want you to have courage to step into the new story, and may you start living that story. Thank you very much.
Sure, Martin. Thank you so much. That's absolutely golden. Really appreciate your time with us here today. That was super valuable. I'm excited about all those core lessons. A little shout out for Martin maybe on this platform, which is he's coaching our whole senior leadership team at Outsource CFO. So we're drawing from some of those pools of wisdom as we build. So thanks for that, Martin. Good to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Lau. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. I'm sure everyone needs some time to just digest the last hour and a little bit of content. So we're going to take a quick 10 minutes out, and then we'll be back. It's now 10 minutes past 5 in South Africa. We're perfectly on the clock. At 20 past, we're going to fire up the next session. We're waiting to hear from Max Havman on that side. We'll see you guys soon. 1 minute call, guys. 1 minute call. Grab those coffees. Okay, and we're back. We're back. Hey everyone, grab your seats. Bring that coffee in. It's the home straight here. We've got a couple of really exciting sessions still to come. Max, speaking of those sessions, can I please ask you to step up to the stage with me, please?
Hello, how are you doing?
Hey Max, great and you.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. Yeah, it's been a longish week, but it's been very successful. We got a couple of senior leadership over here from States now that travel's open. So it's been a good week.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much for taking time out of your wild diary to be here with us. It's a big privilege to have you. Guys, Max is the Director of Finance and the Assistant Global Controller for a company called Impact. If you guys haven't had a look at them yet, impact.com is the site. When we started working with Impact about 2 years ago, their numbers were around the 500 people around the world, and they are just about to cross the 1,000 mark if I look at LinkedIn. So it's a mid-sized organization based out in the States that has business all over the world, that's growing at lightning speed, and the environment is so interesting and so complex, and there's so many things to think of. We thought having Max speak to us about how do you manage the finance in an organization like this would be so interesting. Max, over to you.
Thanks, Lo. Yeah, it's certainly been a crazy ride here at Impact, but it's really fascinating and learn something new every day. So thanks so much for inviting me here. I'm happy that I can share hopefully some useful tips for those of you who are working on high growth organizations and the financial elements that go with that. So just a bit of background. So I did my articles at Deloitte in Durban. I was also manager there for 3 years. I was also then fortunate enough to spend 8 years in London with 3 different high growth organizations ranging from 40 to $350 million of turnover. Returned to SA in March last year and straight into lockdown, but was lucky enough to join Impact in June. As Lo said, they are a high growth company. We're a SaaS company which provides a partnership management platform. Cape Town is actually their biggest office. It is a center of excellence for a number of functions, including finance. And yeah, we're going through a fascinating time at the moment. So just to share a couple of highlights with you. So when in my last role in London, I started trying to formulate my own personal philosophy on building a finance team, specifically focused on high growth companies. So a key operational requirement for finance is that we must add value to any organization. I'm passionate about finance. I never want to be seen as a back office function. I don't like to use that word. I want to make sure that the finance function is adding significant value into whatever organization it's a part of. This should extend far beyond transactional reporting and compliance to detailed analysis of trends, competitor analysis, funding decisions, valuations. But this can only be achieved if the foundations of the entire information chain have been soundly built and the accuracy of the inputs ensured. So as a finance team, our objective should always be to move up the financial reporting pyramid, as I call it, from transactional level reporting to operational, tactical, and then to the strategic level, where you're adding the maximum value to any organization. But as I said, you can't move up that chain until the foundations have been set. You know, your reporting, if you went out for a funding round, the data is, the reports that you put out to the funder, to the banks, investment banks, is only as good as the data it's a part of. So there's no point putting out that data if no one can rely upon it. Now, how do you work up that different value chain? How do you create that organization? And I believe you have 3 resources at your disposal here: the people, your processes, and your systems. So I'm going to go into a bit more depth about each of those different resources and just try and share some of my learnings with each of you. The first one, which I'm sure you all realize being in business, which is the most important, is the people. There is no way you're going to build a successful financial department without ensuring you have the right people in place. So what does that mean for a high growth company? It is a specific set of skills and personalities which you need to involve. So it's important that during the hiring process, you're looking for certain elements which will key to success. One is that those individuals are agile. Can they think on their feet? Can they pick up certain trends very quickly? Are they able to adapt and change their focus relatively quickly? If they may be perhaps a bit more conservative in their thinking or a bit more structured in their thinking, they may find it difficult to adapt to this high growth, agile environment. Obviously, with that comes an element of problem solving. Because you're encountering new issues which perhaps haven't been raised before, they need to be able to problem solve. And that often requires distilling large amounts of data, being able to see what the issue is, and then addressing that specific issue amongst all the chaos of everything in the background. So that's quite a specific skill which not everyone has perhaps developed. They should be constantly questioning. So as either a finance leader or a business leader, you shouldn't have to constantly remind your staff to question elements. You're in a high growth organization, there's change all around you. What you want is staff who are doing that on their own. They're being proactive. They are asking questions themselves about what they see in front of them. One thing I found as well is that generally when you're hiring for individuals, you should probably look at a slightly more experienced role than you would in a company that is a bit more structured and is a bit more been there a longer time and is a bit more fixed in the way it operates. That's because they need to think in their feet. They need to be able to problem solve. So if you're looking for someone who's straight out of articles for a company which is their processes are set, you may need to look for someone that's got a couple of years experience behind them, and they can add that to your organization when they join. Something which I also try and look for is optimists. When you're building an organization, you are, to tell you the truth, constantly failing at certain aspects of what you're doing because you're solving problems, because you are creating infrastructure. So it's good to have optimists around. If you have staff who get bogged down in, not necessarily having the answers right in front of them, it can become a bit of a drain. It's great to have a lot of optimists in the business so that they can keep up that energy and not let, not necessarily solving all the issues right up front get to them. So I think having optimists is quite a nice trait to have in your staff. And then what I mean by getting your hiring plan right is don't look for your immediate needs. Don't plan for the day-to-day. This is something I've learned very recently, especially at Impact, is that, don't build out a traditional hiring plan based on your month-end close or your processes that you see in front of you. If you know that you're going to add 300 heads in the next year, which we're doing at Impact, you need to plan for those different elements. You need to think ahead and say, are we opening up offices in these locations? What kind of resource constraints is that going to have us? And really start to think 6 to 12 months ahead. And if you have the luxury of some funding around you, try and put some of that funding into the finance department to build in additional capacity so that if staff leave or there are other elements you want to do a new funding round or you want to have different acquisitions, you have some capacity in there to address it. So just be flexible on your hiring plans in that aspect. Now, moving on to your processes. This is also something which needs to change. What often happens is that these high growth organizations are owner managed. They might have been doing things a certain way for quite a while. And so inertia becomes the enemy. If you have perhaps staff or processes which have been in place for a long time and have served you in that organization, if you're going to suddenly double in size in a short amount of time, things have to change. Do not just accept the norm and go with what has been done because that's what you've done in the past. You need to be questioning and looking at for efficiencies constantly and making sure that the current processes are fit for purpose going forward. Do you rely on a number of key staff? So again, in an owner-managed business, you build the business up with a certain amount of staff. They might have been with you for a number of years. You rely upon them for certain key elements. You might start to create a weak control environment. It's the same financial staff doing payroll and cash. All those sorts of conflicts of interest, which you learn about in audit and your auditors remind you about constantly. You need to start to look at those risks as the business grows, and make sure that you aren't weakening your control environment too much. It also creates a business continuity risk as well. If your key staff are across too many functions and they decide to leave the business, then you are going to compromise your ability to adapt and to service the business. Related to that is, are your processes documented? So as you develop these processes and go through, everything needs to be on paper. It relates to your business continuity risk as well. Because there are perhaps some staff turnover and because things are adapting, it needs to be in writing. Otherwise, if new staff join, you have to spend all of that time trying to teach staff and hand over information, in conversations, instead of just sending them the documentation and building a control environment off the written word. Are the processes scalable? As you go through high growth, is what you're doing now fit for a company twice your size without employing a finance team twice your size? And then how do you manage the validity, accuracy, and completeness of your data? So looking at your customer master files and data like that. So how are you managing that? Is it in Excel, or do you have proper processes to manage that? And lastly, systems. Sorry, I know we're running short on time, so I'll work through it.
Go for it, Max.
Yeah, but first on systems, this is really why I think when you start to be a bit more mature in your operations, you can achieve scale in the business. But Excel is not a system. It's essentially a document to allow you to manage some data. It is not a ERP CPQ system, which allows you to achieve scale and build a control environment around that. When you're implementing new systems, make sure you commit enough resource to ensure a successful implementation, and make sure you do your research beforehand. All the systems look great on a demo as well, but make sure you get in-depth references and validate the system and that partner's performance. This happens time and time again. They come in, they do a demo of the system, it looks fantastic. You sign the scope of work, the sales team disappears, and you're left with an implementation team that's completely new, and things may start to fall apart. So make sure you're committing enough resources both to plan and to implement the system. Look at your master file data. You've got to clean up all your data so that you make sure you're putting in clean data into your systems. Don't put bad data in there, otherwise it becomes useless. You've wasted your time and money. Another item which to be aware of is that a lot of business owners try to think that their finance team can handle the implementation and the maintenance of that system within their normal day-to-day. Finance staff are well trained, and generally we try and do as much as we can, and we work on these systems extensively. We're not specifically trained for the detailed software that is out there now. So advanced ERP systems like Sage, NetSuite, SAP are not able to be run by finance staff. So I would say start simplest is best, and look at a separate finance systems team that can run that for you. I've got a couple of, Lo, you got another 2 minutes, or you want me to cut off there?
Go for the 2 minutes. We've got a little bit of fat built in, Max. Thanks.
Sure. So if you're looking at international expansion, this is something just to be aware of. If you're a business owner, there is a lot of complexity around opening up new entities overseas. You're also starting to operate in a control environment which perhaps your finance staff haven't had experience of. So if you're in South Africa, employing South African finance staff, you want to expand and open an office in the US or Singapore or somewhere incredibly complex like Brazil and China, be very aware of the complexity of the statutory environment that you're going into. I would also say outsource for as long as you can. Find good service providers and rely on them. Don't try and build a team from scratch until you have the scale to support them. Another tip is ensure stakeholder management. So ensure your finance team is seen as an integral part of the operations of the business. Don't put them in a back office with the broom closet. Make sure your finance team is on the factory floor, in the sales team, sitting amongst the sales team. Make sure that they understand the business and become integrated into your organization. And then also something which starts to change is as you're growing an organization, a lot of it comes at sales at all costs. You need to start to adapt your approach slightly. So as your risk increases, you need to start including your finance in those discussions to say, what are the implications of these decisions that we're making? Is it scalable? Are we covering our risks? And how does it affect our resourcing decisions down the line? So that, as I said, when you double in size, your finance team doesn't necessarily have to double in size as well. That's the quick and dirty of it for now. If you have any more questions, I'd love to answer them. either now or please feel free to email them through as well.
Thank you, Max. Thanks so much, guys. If you have questions for Max on that, please pop them into the chat and we'll get to them at the end. Max, we're going to move this for the sake of time, but thank you so much for that insight into what it takes to run the finance of a 1,000-man team that is still growing at such a rapid rate. Such a great moment of insight for all the founders building companies that want to ultimately get to that level. So thanks for being here with us.
Pleasure. All the best. Thanks so much, Lo.
Thank you. See you soon. Okay, can I call on the doctor? Dr. Yassine Khan, are you able to jump on with me?
I am. I'm right here, Lo.
Brilliant, guys. We're so privileged to have Yassine with us today. He's one of the co-founders of a company called EM Guidance that's been making a lot of waves in the medical technology industry of late. We've asked him to just share some of his doctor's notes on how to raise finance for a scale-up company. They've raised a couple of interesting rounds over the years, and Yassine has amazing insights into that process. So, Yassine, we're in your hands. We'd just love to hear kind of how you guys think about approaching fundraising. How do you get to investors? How do you prep? How do you think about that process? And how do you guys do it? Over to you.
Thanks so much, Joe. I'm not quite sure if you can call me a doctor at this stage. I've been kind of 8 years out of it, and I'm hoping that I'm kind of getting to a point where I'm a good entrepreneur and a bad doctor. Somewhere about 4 years ago, I was equally bad at both. And very useless, like to both worlds. So I hope I'm kind of moving along and becoming a better businessman now. But look, thanks to everyone. Really, very much of a pleasure to talk to everybody. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, first I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself and EM Guidance's history with the lens of our kind of fundraising and how we've capitalized the business up to now. And then I'm really going to hone into a couple of key lessons that we undertook and that I'd like to share. And they were sort of they were dotted very much on our journey all the way up to now. So it's really in that spirit that I'm going to be talking to you. I must acknowledge that with these things, one is not it's important to kind of qualify the position that one talks from. EM Guidance is a company, and as you know well, Lo, we've grown EM Guidance in South Africa. It's a leading medtech health tech startup in South Africa. We've recently expanded into the region, and we're commercially contracting throughout the sub-Saharan African region. We certainly kind of haven't progressed to the point where we've raised a $10-20 million Series A globally as yet. But we've raised, over several rounds, both kind of angel seed, as well as institutional funding. We've raised several millions of rands. In my time before EM Guidance, I raised money in a non-profit capacity as well. So really, from that perspective, there have been a good couple of lessons. So I'm going to dive in. Basically in the very early days, before founding EM Guidance, I was, of course, a medical doctor. I was an emergency room doctor. And I think what's important to qualify is that, and this is probably true for any other professional coming in and becoming an entrepreneur and raising funds, the skill set that one has as a doctor is very different to the skill set of an entrepreneur. I think they're probably completely antithetical, like they kind of conflict with each other. Like, doctors are extreme perfectionists often. They don't delegate very well. And I'm sure those of you that know doctors, they generally don't make good business people. I think they make money by virtue of the good service they offer. So there was a lot of unlearning that I had to do in moving into the space. And one sort of has to sort of calibrate what the learning is and how the aptitude one has to have in raising money. The best example that I can give is the burden of proof for making a diagnosis is not the same burden of proof that you need when you kind of talking about the market size of your business. There's a different burden of proof in that, and you've sort of got to understand that when you go to the kind of fundraising interface and engage in fundraising. So if I boil it back way back down to the start of our story, when we had initially developed we ran a non-profit for 3-4 years in the mobile m-health space, and I was involved in a number of projects where we were dealing with little mobile applications that we built in partnership with healthcare institutions, really with the aim of capacitating healthcare professional decision making. And then my colleague and I decided to spin out one of the applications and get into the for-profit space and build what is really a healthcare platform that ultimately does something very simple. It provides a leading medicine support service to healthcare professionals. And it's got to do with medicines information, digital tools, and a number of means to support prescribing. But our business model really involves working with the big multinational pharma industry. And we really are the leading customer engagement platform for the multinational pharma industry in South Africa and more so in Southern Africa right now. But in the very beginning, lesson one, I would say, when we went out and raised our first funds, the first thing that we did was we understood that we didn't know very much about the language of fundraising. I think that was something that stood with me in the very beginning. And I think that when in the first couple of investment meetings that I had, as founders do, you do several of these things. The first couple of meetings, I spoke a lot about the problem, and I spoke a lot about the solution we were intending to build. I think we really took off, and we raised a good amount of money in our very early stage, probably more so than kind of most of the colleagues that we had in the space at that point in time. And I think one key reason for it is that we brought on quite sophisticated corporate finance support very, very, very early on. We actually partnered with who are still partners and kind of long-term supporters of the business right now, but the guys at BDO in Cape Town, who had a lot of foresight to kind of assist us in the very beginning. And what we did was, one of the things I, as a founder, never really understood in the beginning was you can talk a lot about the problem and you can talk a lot about the market, but the language of return is something else. Like how do you really talk about how much an investor is going to make from this investment? And it really boils down to the numbers. And you do your best to postulate financial projections, and you talk about the market, and you talk about the revenue projections. But I think with like proper corporate finance support, we could give some level of like detailed confidence on, look, you put in so much money, this is the current share price now, this is likely what's going to happen at the next round, there's going to be so many shares in issue, the next investors are probably going to invest at X, your share price is going to go from like A to B, and we can talk about the assumptions around that. But that picture, like really honing into that, and I don't see a lot of other founders like talk a lot about that to investors. The truth is, in the very early stage, a lot of that is probably hogwash. But I think like what I uncovered was that like investors really like that part of things. And if you as the founder CEO, you're not talking about that, then I think like something is missing, that they feel like your head is not enough in the money and the finances. So that was like a really important lesson, just proper corporate finance sophistication, and like me as a founder and CEO kind of wrapping my head around that properly. That was the first sort of real hard lesson. And then the second lesson, I think, was that this question about when you're in your very early days, I think one would be surprised by the amount of angel and very early seed capital available among what are moderately high net worth individuals in your space, or who understand what you're trying to do. And that money could go, in South African terms, could go into the several millions of rands, as it did with us. So with us, what did we do? We approached ex-pharmaceutical C-suite individuals. We approached medical specialist colleagues, and we had coffee with them, and we told them what we're doing, and they understood what we were doing. And the cycle for landing investment was very quick. And there was obviously a lot of trust at play, but ultimately it was super fast, and it allowed us to get going very quickly and build product very quickly. And I still see a lot of founders in the very early stage, going for institutional capital, which like has its, it certainly has its drawbacks in the very early stage. And certainly from a timing perspective, takes arguably, 6 months to a year. So that was sort of the second lesson, like really honing in and engaging with proper like high net worth individuals who understand what you're doing and find them. And we were quite like, we did it quite broadly. We weren't too worried about, having quite a few of them on our cap table in the very early phase, because we did the maths and we said, well, if we can get like, a bar or two out of like, several people, 5, 10 people, like we could, put in a lot of money very quickly and get going. And so we did that, and that worked, and that really worked as well because we had kind of the sophisticated corporate finance support at the table. So that sort of mix worked. Then, if I fast forward a little bit, I think that this question about I'm also just doing a time check if I'm good for time.
Perfect, Yassine. We can do another minute or two. You started late, so you can take the 2 minutes if you need it, Yassine.
Perfect. So I'll end up with a kind of little analogy that we use internally, which kind of speaks to when we eventually progressed. And what we did was we progressed. So we've done 5 rounds of fundraising now with this latest round. We started very small 6 years ago. We eventually got the business, and we to become self-sustainable on revenues. And now this latest round, we're raising expansion capital to expand the business outside of South Africa. So that we've done that trajectory from like very small kind of angel level investment all the way to institutional capital. And the story that I like to leave with you with institutional capital is, this is not much of a Q&A, but it's an interesting thing to reflect on. Which animal in the African savannah has the highest hunting hit rate, highest success rate when it comes to hunting? And I often ask these people this question, and people often say, well, it's the lion, it's a fish eagle or whatever. And it's funny, it's the African wild dog. And I use this story very particularly because it actually applies not only to our fundraising, but to our B2B sales. What's very interesting about the tactics that the African wild dog uses is that, so they do a few things, right? So firstly, if a pack of wild dogs are hunting a herd of giraffe, the first thing they do is they pick one, and they only go for that one, and they kind of pick the one that they're likely to take down. They separate it from the herd, and then they chase it. That's the first thing they do. The second thing they do is they just chase it for a ridiculously long while. They chomp at its heels, and they keep on going, and they make sure they have the endurance to kind of keep going and getting at it. And eventually they tire the thing out, and then the thing collapses. And then they do the third thing they do is, as soon as the thing collapses, they devour it like almost instantaneously before any hyenas or any other predator has a chance to take it down. And I reflected on that because the key thing is that when it comes to institutional fundraising, I think your pre-planning and your strategy as to how you're going to do this and the tactics that you deploy are so important because they suck up like all of your time. And so if I think about institutional funders and I think about the way wild dogs do this, firstly, the grading and the selection of who you're actually going to go for, and not going to speak to kind of every last institution under the sun. You go for the ones you're going to win, because once you're there, you're investing your time, and that's it. The second thing is be prepared for endurance. Like, no matter what they tell you, you're not closing the deal in 3 months. Everyone says that, first meeting to disbursement in 3 months. I've never experienced that. I'm not sure if any of you have. So have enough cash in your bank, know what your plan is, don't fall off a cliff like it's going to absolutely tire you out. And then lastly, when they bite, like, and when you actually sign the deal, like, race through like the legals and the contracting, and just like do the DD, be fully prepared for the DD. If that stuff, that last part, if that part protracts, like, somebody else is gonna come and take your money. So that was kind of my last analogy. I hope that kind of rings a bell with some of you. But thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Loa. I hope I've respected the time.
No, that's perfect, Yassine. Thank you so much for those insights, and I love that analogy. Definitely going to use that as well. It's so clever, really cool. Thank you for sharing your learnings with us. I'm sure there's a ton of golden nuggets everyone can take away on their own fundraising journey. So thanks for that.
Thanks.
Okay, guys. Thanks, man. We're moving over to our second last panel. Can I please ask Uwais Asmal to jump on? Yeah, there we go. There's Uwais, as well as his panel, Daniel and Felix. We're going to talk about drumming up new business in the new year. I think the way business development and marketing and sales has been done throughout the years compared to how it's been done in the last 18 months is quite different. So looking at next year, we want to find out from these two experts, like how do you actually acquire new clients in this environment? Uwais, over to you.
Thanks so much, Lo. Hi, everyone. My name is Uwais Asmal, and I'm the Executive Head of Advisory Services at Outsource CFO. My guests today are, as Lo mentioned, Daniel Greaves, CEO of Fly, and Felix Norton, Managing Director of Wow, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So welcome, gents. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Uwais, nice to be here.
So
yeah, no, it's great. Can you hear me?
We can hear you clearly. Hear you clearly. So Fuel to Fly gives you the best calculated B2B cold outreach delivered directly to your inbox, and Wow offers expert WordPress services to help you build an online presence. So both of my guests have great experience in sales and business development. If I can, and as Lo mentioned, our topic for today is drumming up new business in 2022. So let's jump straight in. I'm going to ask different questions to each of you, but please feel free to add your thoughts if I've asked a question to the other person, if you have something else to add. So maybe Daniel, let's start with you. Has the way new business is acquired changed compared to pre-pandemic? Is your approach the same, or are you doing things differently?
So it was an interesting one for us because we started Fuel to Fly in October of 2019. So we didn't really get it much of a pre-pandemic stage. So basically what we did was our client base is international. And so we were already on the like virtual Zoom call type of sales. As we're an outbound business, we already had a big push on outbound. What we saw happen was initially when the pandemic hit, there was like a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, and our clients mostly in the B2B space. And there was a bit of a panic and like pulling back on budgets. So a few things got pushed out. And then people kind of realized, especially in the B2B space, hey, we have to crack on. Everyone, any founder, I think, or anyone on this call probably had the same idea, right? We have to adapt, we have to crack on. And then what we found was there was we actually had a lot of demand, a lot of people looking to do more outbound because they weren't getting as much of and Felix, you can jump in here if you saw something similar. They weren't getting as much.
The identical situation.
Yeah, weren't getting as much inbound attraction because people were pulling back. They were anxious to maybe spend more money or look for a service. So people came to us and they were like, we need to go and knock on doors or send a ton of emails, basically. But the way of actually doing sales and how sales was done, I don't think much changed. I mean, still building connection and doing your thing behind the camera instead of in the meeting room, right?
Felix, on your side, has your approach changed? Did you move maybe to a different customer segment, and your lead times in terms of sales, has that changed?
So we did. We had a very similar experience about how customers changed their willingness or their need to adopt, digital. In terms of like whether or not our customers changed, we still kept the same customer type, which is small to medium-sized businesses. And as said, like it was a far easier sell. But the trend that we noticed is that a lot of the bigger clients that were at more established and larger agencies, they were starting to shop around looking for a better deal, looking for an alternative provider. And then we saw another trend on also the lower end, where a lot of agencies that struggled, the small agencies that struggled during COVID, ended up closing shop as they buckled under the pressure. And that left a nice kind of a lot of food on the table, because we could welcome everyone with welcome arms from both the kind of larger side and the smaller side. So actually COVID was pretty great. It's weird saying that, but we thrived.
Felix, I want to stick with you quickly. So, I mean, you trained as a computer scientist and a web developer. And as a bit of a generalization, that doesn't scream great at sales. Were you good at sales when you started? And how did you improve your sales skills, especially for those businesses or starting new businesses and they maybe don't have a natural sales ability?
Sure. So, well, I love development and being in the digital world. I've always been a bit of a hustler at heart. So from a young age, you know, as a small kid from like around 8 or 9, I used to buy sweets from Macro and sell them, you know, to the other kids at school because they didn't have a tuck shop, because I saw an opportunity and I went for it. I killed at market days. And then even at high school, one of the things I was so eager to kind of earn extra cash that I went around my entire neighborhood, knocked on doors, and offered my services as the local, you know, fix it, Felix, I'll come fix your computer for you. So while I've always had, and I think, a bit of an affinity for that, there are some key things that I've learned, especially while trying to run our business and our agency, because we're reliant on new customers and acquisitions to feed this growing agency. So one thing that I would kind of advise anybody starting out is to be genuine and really understand and believe in what you're selling. You know, if you don't if you don't do that, people will instinctively pick up on it and you'll lose that sale. Nothing drops sale faster than an agent who doesn't know what they're talking about or isn't confident in what they're selling. So that's the kind of one thing. It's just a general tip. And then one thing that I really struggled with initially, but I feel have gotten a solid grasp on now, and I've heard it mentioned multiple times from the other speakers, is communicating the value of your product. And what I mean by that is, don't sell a thing, don't sell the what, sell the what it does. So for us, you know, we build websites, but that's not what we try to communicate. What we're selling is we're going to be building a website or a tool or an asset that's going to generate you revenue. It's going to drive business. So sure, we're building a website, but that's not what it's doing for you. It's building your business. And that's how you got to communicate the value of your product or service. And so that's, yeah, those are the kind of 2 key tips that I would give to anybody starting out. And then just read some good books. There's so many great books out there.
Those are some great tips. So Dan, I mean, you spent quite a bit of your career in sales in very different industries: equities, real estate, accounting, finance, and now with your own business. So you've got some natural sales ability. For those of us who are maybe not as naturally gifted, even those who are, what are those sales mistakes that you see most often, and what practices can help someone raise the bar in terms of their selling skills?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think what I see people generally do, I'll be as fast as I can here. What I see people generally do is they go into the motion of their product and talking about their product, and like Felix mentioned, the what over the what it does. But it's like if you want to take someone out on a date, you don't ask them on a date the first time you see them or meet them, right? What a lot of people, what they skip is the connection. And the best way to kind of put it is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So the first thing for me is, on that first call, don't speak 80% of the time. Ask questions, establish a need, try and build up a conversation, and just connect. All about making a friend first. And once they see that you care, and if there's a need, then you can go forward. And also be open and honest with yourself. If you're speaking to someone that actually doesn't have a need for your product, don't go down the whole convincing lane of, because then let's say you end up doing a great job and you do the deal, we call that a dirty deal, right? Because then you've convinced someone and done a dirty deal, and then your poor account manager has to try and keep them.
I think that's great advice. Felix, maybe let's talk discounts. With some potential clients, that's the first discussion point they run to after you mention your pricing. How do you handle that conversation?
Sure. So, discounts are a powerful sales tool. I think everybody should use discounts, but discounts should be used rather as a last resort. It's never nice to take revenue off the table. So what we try to do when a client asks for a discount is to really understand why they're asking for that discount, because there's an underlying reason. So maybe it's something like a cash flow problem. So instead of offering them a discount, offer them a payment plan, an alternative. Can you pay in smaller chunks over a smaller period of time and still end up getting the net full amount rather than taking a discount? Another thing that clients are often using is as a competitor. I saw somebody else, they're charging this price. So say, okay, cool. Well, are we selling the same thing? Put the onus on the client to actually weigh up whether or not they're getting the same product or the same service at the same price. And often not, more often than not, if you're priced correctly, when somebody is undercutting you, it's because they're cutting corners. So you try and communicate that as a way to assuage their concern. Another thing that you can do is offer alternatives. So, sometimes, you've got, for us, we've got a premium and a standard price. And if a client, we're trying to position the premium product and they want a discount, we say, well, we've got this other product, but then, it's going to be at a different tier. It's going to be at a different service level. But then let's talk about when you do want to, provide a discount. What you can do is always try and play it to your advantage as well. So there's a bit of a compromise there. So some things you can do is you can ask for, a value trade. Say we signed on a coffee company and they want a 20% discount, and we'll say, yeah, sure. But, would you mind throwing in some beans of your product to sweeten that deal, so that we also feel like we're getting something for providing that discount. Maybe it's a positive testimonial, or that they're going to promote you to their network. Another time you could have that, okay, cool, we'll provide a discount, but we're going to require payment up front. That's another great way that you get your cash straight away, and sure, you've maybe lost a bit on the profits, but you do end up getting that cash flow up front. And the same kind of thing with, selling in bulk. Sure, we can provide a discount, but only if you purchase X quantity or X number of hours of our service. So again, discounts are incredibly useful tools, but you just need to know the rules and try and work it to your advantage and compromise with the potential client.
I'll jump in. Go for it. I'll be fast. We have like two structured ways that we built in for discounts. So in our pricing, we already have with our two sales reps is for these packages, these are the max discounts you're allowed to give. And it's called like price fencing, right? And you use it as like a trick up your sleeve. So if they ask for a discount, you can make it seem like it's more difficult than it might be, but the sales guy or woman goes into that call knowing beforehand what kind of knobs they can turn. And then the other one that we've more recently applied is we've said if you refer us to another client, or if you refer us to a client, we'll give you a discount on your monthly retainer. So like if you refer us to a client and we sign them, we'll start giving it. We'll give you 10% off as long as that person's a client.
That's amazing. I've learned a lot. I've got quite a few more questions, but I know we're short for time, so I can't steal any more. Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Lo, over to you.
I'm scared these two gentlemen start selling us something away. So
we've already sold you a new website, so it's all good.
There we go. No,
big. Thanks, guys.
Big one up for the WOW team that have done a really good job at building the new OCFO.com for us recently. We're getting some great results on that end. Thank you, Felix. Zach, I think I just saw Zach jumping on. Zach, are you with us?
Yeah, I was on video, but I think my video got turned off for some reason. But yeah,
perfect. No, good to have you. Zach just got off a call, probably closing the latest deal in the Africa early stage venture space. Zach, great to have you, man.
Thank you. Good to be here, and good to meet everyone.
Great to see you, man. Guys, Zach is probably at the moment the most active early stage venture capitalist on the continent. They've done about 50 deals in under 3 years at the moment, right? With their new fund, right?
Yeah, it's 73 deals in the last 13 months.
Oh my goodness. Okay, guys, I'm going to put my camera off and let Zach George tell you all about the early stage venture landscape on the continent and why they are doing so many deals right now in the early stage.
Yeah, listen, thanks for the opportunity, guys. Yeah, I've been in South Africa for the last 11 years now, but my focus has really been on, how can you back early stage founders at the post idea, post MVP, but sort of pre-Series A level. It's a market that until a couple of years ago was pretty much reserved for companies that had $100,000 or more in recurring revenue, institutional investors backing, etc. So friends and family and limited number of angel investors was the only way a company could raise capital, and it would take them typically anywhere from 9 months to a couple of years to raise $1 million in a seed round, right? So what we decided many years ago was, instead of looking at just starting funds to invest in companies, you would rather create an environment where you could incubate and accelerate and grow companies similar to Y Combinator, Techstore, Startup Bootcamp, which I co-founded in Africa, etc. And then once you create a linkage between large corporates, so insurance companies, banks, retailers, telcos, it's a lot easier to back companies earlier on because you've taken the risk element away from a route to market standpoint. So as a result of that, having run Startup Bootcamp for 4 years across Africa, starting a fund that invested in graduates of world-class accelerators was sort of a no-brainer, right? Because you take away a lot of the tech and legal DD away, and you just focus on acceleration and growth. So even though I physically live in Cape Town, we've got a team all over the continent. And we've deployed $15 million into 73 companies so far, and we're the most active fund on the continent. And I would love to partner with more folks to see how we can make this bigger and better.
Brilliant. Sure, Zach. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I think it's a miracle what you guys are doing. A couple of years ago, like this volume of deal flow in the early stage across the continent has been unimaginable, I think. So congratulations congratulations on your persistence and on what you guys are doing for the ecosystem in Africa. I think that's remarkable. Sure.
Thank you, Lut, and thank you, everyone. I mean, I've known you guys for 6-7 years now, and where you've come from. A small 2-person team doing this as a passion project is now developed into one of the top, virtual CFO tech companies in South Africa and beyond. So, kudos to both of us and everyone else here.
Thanks, man, Zach. Appreciate that a lot. Great to be on the journey with you, guys. If you know early stage founders who are doing brilliant work, reach out to Zach. Him and his team are always looking for the next unicorn in the making. Zach will keep sending them your way.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man. Speak soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Okay, guys. One last session to go. We've got one last panel on building virtual teams. Can I ask Dan and Ed to please join me on stage?
Hello.
Hey, Ed. How are you?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
Great, perfect, thanks. Perfect. Hey, Daniel, how are you?
Hey, no, good and you. It's great to see you. Hey, Ed.
Hey, man, great to see both of you guys. Excited about this last power session ahead of everyone logging off. Guys, Ed is the COO of Nona, one of the most impressive fintech software development companies that I've ever seen. And Dan runs a SME funding platform called Bridgement that's also, I think, disrupting the way in which SMEs get financed in South Africa and beyond. So great to have you guys here. I think it's two fascinating, kind of executives from two fascinating companies we have. And what I really want to achieve with the session is just have a bit of a kind of like an experience share from your side around, this concept of building a virtual team. I think the idea of a company running fully remote 2 years ago was fairly foreign to most founders anyway. Like most teams were in office, building the vibe and the culture and the leadership in office around seeing their clients just there. But Ed, you guys with Nona have had a quite interesting journey in that ahead of COVID, you already started this journey of testing remote. Can I please just maybe for starters ask you to just kind of give a little bit of context to the company, like what do you guys do, your little elevator pitch if you don't mind, and then just tell us about how your team operates right now, and then also like how this remote journey started.
Yeah, sure. So Nona is a custom software development house. We focus on fintech and blockchain application only nowadays. So we used to do everything, food delivery, education, news, etc., but now exclusively fintech and blockchain. We are 35 people. Most of those people are still in Cape Town, even though we're now hiring further afield. And we typically work between South Africa, Australia, the UK, and the US. But at the moment, I have a client in Peru, or Ecuador rather, and some in Canada. So it's quite. We've always been quite global in our client base. So, and to your question about before COVID, how we started being remote. Basically, I don't know, I'm sure it's a distant memory now given the pandemic that swept the world, but we had a bit of a water crisis in Cape Town looming, I think, in 2018, and everyone was shitting themselves, panicking for this like water crisis that's going to come. And a lot of our staff were thinking, well, I'm going to go and stay with my parents in Durban, and we wanted to get ahead of it because it was going to be literal sort of water lines, and I was thinking I don't want to hang around in Cape Town for this. And at the time we were operating with literal physical agile boards with sticky notes and teams that would meet around the physical agile board and move the sticky note. And that's awesome. To be clear, I actually miss big parts of that it creates a different level of engagement than you get remotely. But we realized, we are not prepared for, the toilets not being able to flush in the office and people being away from the office. So I think that was in 2018. We decided to do a full remote experiment and just go, cool, we're going to spend a week out of the office and see how that goes. And we're going to spend 2 weeks out of the office and see how that goes. And then we rolled that forward to a full 4 months with no one coming into the office. Someone could come in if they wanted a bit of quiet time because the water crisis never happened. But effectively, we did the office empty for 4 months. And it really worked. We didn't lose any productivity. A lot of people were super stoked not to be going back and forth and travel for an hour a day. People with young kids were appreciating it. Their partners were appreciating it. We picked up a lot of new tools and ways to collaborate remotely. And after that 4 months, we decided this is great, but we're not going to come back, but we're also not going to stay completely remote. So what we're going to do is do 1 day a week in the office. And so all the way leading up to COVID, we were doing only 1 day a week in the office, and the rest of everything we did was fully remote. So it was a pretty seamless transition for us.
Sure. No, ahead of the curve for COVID. That's amazing. I almost can't remember the water crisis. That's crazy.
Well, there's been a lot worse crises since then.
Wow. Right? Hey, sure. No, the last 18 months have been 10 years, I think. Dan, can I please ask you to just share a little bit about what you guys are up to with Bridgement, and also just maybe like what happened a little bit over 18 months ago when COVID hit?
Yeah, sure. So Bridgement is a South African fintech that specializes in getting funding into the hands of SMEs as quickly as possible. We've got a number of funding products, and what makes us different to like a bank or a traditional credit provider is that we have made it really simple for businesses to access funding by integrating with their accounting packages, with bank accounts and all of that. And so they're able to basically submit or share their financial data without having to, upload documents and complete a whole bunch of paperwork and things like that. So that obviously I think is how we initially met, because we're the top financial services app, the top rated app on the Xero app marketplace. And you, of course, were huge in the Xero world. And so I think we first met at one of those Xero conferences. But so that's a bit about Bridgement. In terms of our remote working, I think my sort of first experience with that was around the 2017 mark, where I just started Bridgement, and I decided that I wanted to bootstrap it instead of going and raising some sort of angel investment. And the way in which I bootstrapped it was essentially I joined a platform, a company called Gigs that's based in Silicon Valley, which essentially sold software projects to enterprises around the world. But the people that they then staffed on those projects, the software engineers, the designers, the product managers, all of that, were from everywhere, from all over the show. And so it was this amazing experience where like this whole company, this organization of thousands of contractors around the world were all managed on Slack, and they built like their own management solution. And I joined as like the senior product manager type of role, where I'd coordinate engineers and designers and deliver these projects to these corporates. And it was just the most amazing experience. Incredibly difficult, especially when dealing with guys across time zones. I mean, we had one project where we had the client in India, a developer in Australia, and a developer in on the west coast of America. So dealing with
it feels like it's usually the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that was sort of my first taste of remote working, and seeing how easy, like, you know, I shouldn't say easy, but how possible it was to achieve, and how you could really go and deliver great quality work to, you know, on massive projects to large corporates. And it really didn't matter about not seeing, you know, not having that sort of face-to-face interactions. So I think that was the start of it. And then, you know, as Bridgman grew and I stopped all of that and was fully focused on Bridgman, and then we did do a capital raise eventually, I sort of was so used to that and made that a rule. Initially, it was only for the engineering team, where engineers were allowed one remote day every single week. And this was pre-COVID. And I just knew, because, you know, engineers, it's really easy. It's also like, it's a very easy sort of business unit or function where you can like see the output. You know, all the code is going to GitHub. You can see everything they're doing every day. Very easy to manage and monitor, as well as all the other tools and things that go with it. And then, COVID came along, and 2 weeks before President Ramaphosa made the announcement at the end of March, we just said, guys, we're feeling uncomfortable, let's go fully remote. And it was easy for us. We were a digital business. We had no paper in the office, no printers, nothing. We were fully digital. We were on Slack, we were on Trello, we were on all these tools already. And so, you know, one day we just didn't rock up to the office, and it was amazing. It really, working remotely, we loved. Our business thrived, it multiplied in size. And then a few months into COVID last year, we just gave up our office, so we didn't have an office until last week. Actually, we went and opened up our office last week, and now we're in that hybrid mode where we're trying to work out how to manage hybrid, which I think is actually more difficult than being fully remote or fully in the office, because the coordination that's required is actually a bit more complicated now.
Let's get to that. I'm going to jump in my question stack, but I think that you've raised a major point here, like, you know, hybrid work environments. Like, what prompted you guys to actually get the office again? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one of the things that we missed the most and that we struggled with the most was brainstorming. We just found like sitting and using some of like the digital whiteboards just was not the same. We couldn't do sort of achieve that. We found that onboarding new employees was a lot more difficult doing it fully remotely. Both, you know, from a knowledge transfer point of view, but also from integrating them into the team. And you know, with a lot of our teammates, we found that different people had different setups at home. So some were super comfortable working at home. They had generators, so load shedding wasn't an issue. They didn't have kids, so that wasn't an issue. Whereas others had kids and load shedding, and so we found we had to have the option to have an office. That's the call. I mean, we're still learning. So who knows where we end up? We're definitely in a test mode at the moment. But our test now is we've opened up an office, completely optional to come in. There aren't any forced days or anything like that yet. We're sort of trying to work that out and see what people sort of what their preferences are.
Got it. Sure. Fascinating. I think many companies are figuring that out right now. Hey, Ed, what are you guys thinking? Fully remote for the future, or some kind of a hybrid solution?
Yeah, look, I loved hybrid. That was ideal at the time when it worked, because we'd meet in the office once a week, and like Daniel mentioned, there was some great collaborative work that happened at the time, whiteboarding style stuff, and a lot of lunch eating together and hacky sack predominantly that sort of spread the cultural thing. But that said, no, we are not thinking about going back to a hybrid approach. We're fully embracing remote and the sort of benefits that come from that. We're hiring more further afield. We're hiring people outside of Cape Town. And we find that the partial hybrid model would lead to even more of a feeling of alienation for our sort of new European and Joburg-based employees, etc., than it would. And that second-class citizen approach starts to happen, right? So what we've done instead is we've, at the moment, with Ideas Cartel in Cape Town and with budgets in other places, just gone, here are shared working spaces. You can do collaborative work there together. You want to get out of the house, you've got kids, and we've got these sort of non-full-time packages, because we know people aren't going to go in full-time, but they can go at least sort of once in every 2 days as part of the packages. We have the remote working locations, and then that gives them the option, absolutely, if they, like have the load shedding issues, have the kid issues. And again, I don't know if that's better. I certainly love the office, but there's too many benefits to the remote world that we're seeing in terms of reach, in terms of people's goals and dreams. I mean, for myself, I don't have a house anymore. I don't have a lease or an address. I'm in a different place every month, and that's awesome. And a couple of other people are doing similar things, and going to France and working from there. And as the pandemic chills out, the scope of that opens up even more, and that sort of quality of life that you can get from being able to live that way. And I don't mean permanently on the road like I am. I just mean I want to go and stay with my mom in Durban and work from that house for a month and build those relationships up again. It's a massive change to having a commitment where you have to be in a particular place.
The flexibility is amazing, right? But I think then just the big question is just culture, right? Like people build like trust relationships and engage in a different way face to face than online. There is just still a slight barrier.
Yeah.
How do you guys continue to build a great company culture and those interpersonal trust relationships?
Yeah, so the problem with this is I don't have enough data to know if what I'm going to say now is actually working. We do a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of tools and tricks that we're employing to ensure that. But I'm also riding the wave of an excellent culture that we developed by being in person together. So I can't say if this stuff's working. So we do a lot of events. These are all elective. We do a lot of virtual and in-person events. So we've done murder mysteries, quiz nights where I'm doing the quiz nights where a stranger's facilitating it, escape rooms, one with South African people, one in Britain, one just that's in America, like all sorts of online events, online poker evenings, all sorts of stuff, right? And those are all elective, but getting incredibly good uptake on that during the pandemic. And now even post-pandemic, there's some people that are further remote or don't want to come to the in-person events. So they're still at 50-60% of the company still plays the online games. Then we do at least monthly, there'll be like a breakfast or a dinner or very informal, just like, hey, people are meeting at this place and doing that, and it's on our tab. And then at least quarterly, a far more organized one. And those, at the moment, the people that live in Cape Town, again, it's about 80% of the people that are coming to those now. That'd be go-karting or riding scooters down the mountain and ziplining or something like adrenaline-y with the group together. So we're doing a lot of that. To your point, like organized video meetings feel kind of foreign and you're not kind of building the same rapport. But if you're responsible for a group of people and you don't have the office anymore, what we do is just phone someone, sometimes not even scheduled, a regular fucking phone call, right? And don't talk about work stuff as much as you can. Like you want to get to know people, like say that, like have the conversation like you're trying to make a friend if it's not someone you know well, or it's the new guy at the office. So, talk about the wife, the kids, the sports you're into, what do you drink, whatever. And like, I find it quite easy because I'm generally quite extroverted. So maybe it's not easy for everybody, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes as well. And those informal conversations are huge and really help. And yeah, the trickier thing is getting to encourage that between people. And not making it like a mandated thing that leadership does. But again, we're really riding the wave of an excellent culture where some of people are already friends from having worked together for 7 years, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know that in a fully remote environment, starting that way, that these things work. But we've had really good reports in our, so we hired about 8 or 9 people since the pandemic. And we've had really good feedback from them, or maybe they're just too new to tell us the truth. We had really good feedback from them on the onboarding experience remotely and the amount of contact they have with people and the answers they get to questions and things. Yeah.
Well, thank you. There's a lot of gold nuggets there. I think tons of people are making notes at the moment around that. Thank you very much for that. Dan, we have to just about wrap up, but I do want to hear kind of like what your biggest remote leadership tactic would be if you were to kind of like run a team that, we'll assume even if some people go to the office some days, most of your communication team-wide still for a very long time and maybe indefinitely will be at least partially remote. What do you
Yeah, I think, this might be a bit contentious. I know my partner, Christy, works for a digital agency where they're always like video off. I'm a huge believer in video on. When you're remote and not seeing people, I think there's massive value to seeing people's faces. And also it means that like you can see if someone's actually concentrating in the meeting or, they're doing other things. I think when you're remote and you're communicating a lot by text, I think it becomes even more important to over communicate and even use emojis, because tone and emotion is often lost, right, when you're talking in written text. I think focusing on and investing time in those social interactions is so much more critical when you're remote. And so those more sort of frequent events and socializing things, I think, is important, and you have to be creative. I think it definitely requires a bit more effort. When you're working in an office and an employee, gets stuck on something, it's super easy for them to, pop up and ask a question. I think sometimes when you're working remote, people might take longer to actually ask those questions and try and get unblocked. And so sometimes you have to be a bit more hands-on in terms of checking in and making sure that everything's okay. I think the last tip I would give is, the usage of tools, things like Slack and Trello or Jira or whatever your preferences are critical. But it's also how you use those. Trello or Jira, much more of an asynchronous type of messaging tool, and project management type tool, or whatever you want to call it. Slack obviously is a lot more synchronous. They have their benefits, they have their pros and their cons, and I would just say use them wisely. Be super careful, because if you use them in the wrong way, they can be terrible. If you use them in the right way, they can be the most amazing things and really enable that remote working.
Love it. Dan, thank you so much for spending time with us today. That's unfortunately all we've got time for. I would love to pick your brains for another hour on how we get this remote and or hybrid leadership thing like just perfect. But yeah, I really appreciate the insights shared, and good luck with both of your companies.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Lo. Thanks for the invite. Cheers, Dan.
Thanks.
Yeah,
guys.
thanks, Lo. Cheers. Cheers, Ed. Ciao.
Okay, everyone, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you very much for being here with us today. It's been a proper, just about an hour, a 2.5 hour stint. I think there's been a lot of interesting experience shares and some great content from really interesting founders and investors. We've heard from VCs, we've heard from people who are raising for growth, we've heard from people who have exited, and we've heard from people who are managing different parts of organizational complexity. We've heard from leaders in different capacities. We've thought about managing in this current remote and or hybrid environment. We've learned how to drum up new business for the new year and a whole bunch of different other things. So I hope this has been super valuable for you guys. I know I have learned a lot. I've got a ton of notes here to get back to. Thank you very much for being here with us today. We'll see you guys all in the new year for our next big event. Great to have you all, and see you soon. Thank you very much to the Atsos CFO marketing and tech team in the back end who make all of this possible. Thanks so much, guys. See you.